Alright, let's now build the very simple footer of our page. And so in this section, you're actually not going to learn any new stuff, but you will apply all the concepts that we already learned to a new situation. And so that's also helpful to practice. So what we will do is just basically this very simple footer navigation here, and then this text down here. So something very simple. So this is where our footer is. And so let's use a nav element, and I'm also actually going to call it nav. So nav for navigation. Then in there, as always, we have a bunch of li elements. Nav item, and then in there we have a couple of links. So a dot nav link pointing to nowhere, and then the text in the first one is find your dream home. And so let's copy that and create a bunch more. So request proposal, download the home planner. So this is just a couple of link items that don't really matter. It's just some placeholder text here. So submit your property. And finally, come work with us. And so let's now style all of this. And the first thing that we want here is in a footer is some padding. Okay, so that we can actually see what's going on here. And then our navigation. Okay, and actually this should be not a nav element, but an UL. Okay, so if we have an li element, that one should always be inside a UL element. Okay, so now that we have the UL, we can then say that we want list style none. And so let's just take a look at that now. And here we go. Now, how do we put these items here side by side? We can use Flexbox and we can use grid. Well, in this case, we have a one-dimensional layout, and so Flexbox would seem like the best choice. But actually, I will use CSS grid. And that's because I find it easier to work with grids when we want some space between the elements, right? So with Flexbox, we would have to use margin right, and then on the last element, we would have to say that we want no margin at all, okay? And with CSS grid, it's just more natural. We just have to define a grid gap, and it just happens like between the elements. And so until there's something like that in Flexbox, I find it easier to work in these situations with CSS grid. So let's define now a simple grid, and it's simply going to be 6 columns, right? And it's actually not actually here, but here in the nav, of course. So display grid, and the template columns should be. And now let's think about this. So once more, we want this to be automatically responsive without writing the media queries, right? And so instead of just writing 6.1fr, which would get the job done, we can make it better. And so instead, we use our old trick where we use autofit here as the number of columns. And so that one will automatically figure out how many tracks there should be. And the size should always stay behind, let's say for now, 20 rem and 1 fr. And so as soon as one of these tracks gets narrower than 20 rem, one of the column tracks will disappear, right? So that's what we've always been doing. So let's now actually style these links so that we can then take a look at if that actually works, okay? So let's style a link, and of course the link state and the visited state. And that's not correct, of course, but that's it. So that's the way we've been always doing it. Select the link and the visited state here at the same time. So font size 1.4 rem. The color should be white. no text decoration in order to get rid of the underlining, and the font family should be our display font. I also want the text in uppercase and the text to be aligned at the center. And finally, just so that we can actually see these items, let's change the background color a little bit. And so what I'm going to do here is to set it to a white color with only a very, very small alpha. Okay, and so it's basically going to be transparent, meaning that it will be a slightly lighter blue, right? So let's just take a look at that now. And okay, that doesn't look perfect yet, so let's just add some padding here. Okay, so padding 1.5 rem, and in order for this to actually be applied, let's set this to a block. So let's say display block. So how's that going to look? And all right. Now, the thing that I was telling in the beginning that we need here, of course, is the gap. So grid gap to rem. And so it's really great with grid to add spacing. So all we have to do is to use this gap property, and it's really easy to work with this. Because again, this doesn't add any space at the end of the container like margin right would do if we use flexbox here instead. So like this, it's going to be just perfect. And all right, so we have this nice spacing here going on now on all of them except the last one. And so let's now take a look what happens when we actually decrease the viewport. And oh, you already see that it starts a new column here. Okay, and that's very soon. Oops. So let's actually change that minimum limit here to something a bit smaller. Okay, so it hit these 20 rem pretty soon and went from 6 columns to 5 columns. But if we change that to something smaller, of course, then that limit happens a bit later. And so let's take a look at that. And yeah, so it's happening now. And that's perfectly fine like this. So 3 by 2, and now at some point it will become 3 by 2, yeah, and then just like this in the end. So that's perfect. Okay. Now we of course want these to be like aligned in the vertical direction, and that's very easy to do. By now you're already familiar with this. So align items center. So aligning all of the grid items inside their grid cells along the column axis. So vertically. And here we go. And of course, as we start decreasing, then these here change and automatically align as well. Right? So that part is actually done. Let's just add like some nice hover animation here. So transition all 0.2 seconds. And then let's add this background color here only when we hover. So on hover and on active. All right, great. I think I also had this effect where I moved it up a little bit. So just a small translate. So again, nothing new here for you. Just to make it a little bit nicer, right? Okay. And now all there's left to do is like the small copyright text here. And so, yeah, let's put that there as well. Here, right after this UL element. So a paragraph with copyright. And so let me write some text here again. So copyright 2017 by Jonas Schmettmann. And that's me, of course. So again, please feel free to use this project for your own purposes. Okay? Now, this does not apply if you plan to produce your own video course or tutorials based on this project. Okay, and I'm saying that because unfortunately I actually had people trying to do that. So some people, they take my project and then they do their own video courses with that, and that's not allowed. Okay, and so yeah, just adding that here to make that crystal clear. So let's get this copyright class and add it down here. So a font size 1.4 rem, and the color that we want here is let's see, it's this one. So color light 2. Let's add some margin from the top of 6 rem and text align center. Let's just take a look at that. And all right, that looks quite good already. Now let's actually just make this a bit shorter maybe. So with, let's say 70%. Whoa, what's happening now? Okay, I see that now it's of course not centered here inside this parent element. So we can use the trick where we make the left and the right margin set to auto. So margin right, auto, and margin left, auto, and that is going to fix that. All right, and that's it. So that's a very small footer here. And so we practice some more with CSS Grid with making this responsive here. So basically without writing the media query, having it adapt to the screen size. And yeah, so we're already getting close to the end here. In the next video, we're just going to finish here the sidebar, and there's actually not a lot to do. It's just adding a small button here, which is actually not doing anything at all. Okay, and then after that, we have just this header and this realtors part here. Okay, so we're getting close to the end, and next up, we have this sidebar here.